pleasure to be here. Thanks everybody for being here today. I know some of you are here for extra credit, some of you are here for learning. Hopefully you're all here to learn. And so I'm going to talk about prevention through design concepts and fundamentals. So I'm the president and CEO of the National Academy of Construction. And so the National Academy of Construction is an honorarium, but also an organization that actually takes a real active role in trying to improve our industry. And one of our focus areas is safety. And so we kind of work through that. I've been in that position since January of 2023. Before that, from 2009 to 2022, I was a faculty member here in the School of Sustainable Engineering and the Built Environment. I ran the Del Webb School of Construction for a time, and then I was the director of the school at one point. I'm wearing a hard hat here. And you may notice that there's some facade behind me that maybe looks familiar. This was taken right out back here, and I was really the proponent of getting this building built. When I came here in 2009, we had some money that was raised. We were in a really bad economy, and I kind of kept pushing through, and finally in the fall of 2014, we opened this building. And so I kind of served as the de facto project manager for ASU during that project. So the guys that are behind me are all graduates of Del Webb School of Construction. Pretty much everybody who ran the project here had a relationship with ASU. And so it was a really challenging and fun part of my life. But part of what we were looking at that point was safety. And so we wanted to have a safe job. That was a given. And I would say that we didn't have any injuries, accidents on this project because we were pretty diligent about it. The other thing is I've got an old-fashioned hard hat on right there. Would that be something that I would be wearing today on a construction site? What do you think? Probably not. You know, at this point, most progressive construction companies have gone to the helmet, which is almost like an old bicycle helmet with a chin strap and integrated concussion protocol in the helmet, so that if you do fall, the helmet doesn't flip off of you and you hit your head. We're thinking that maybe with widespread adoption, it may save 20% of the fatalities in the construction industry in a few years, because many people die of traumatic brain injuries. So everything you think about in your career moving forward should be thinking about how to make people safe, how to make the job safe, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to talk about that today, but I'm going to talk about it in the context of the design process, but also I'm going to talk about it in the context of the pre-construction process as well. Okay? So that's really where we are. Our industry's a dangerous industry. 8% of the workers, 22% of the fatalities. About 1,000 people a year die in industrial accidents in the United States every year. Worldwide, 60,000 fatalities in construction. I know many of you are going to get a degree here and go somewhere else outside the U.S. A lot of fatalities. If you've ever been on a construction project with a fatality, it's not a good experience, right? 170,000 serious injuries. And the issue is that we passed a set of regulations called OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, back in the early 70s. It's been around 50 years, and safety has improved dramatically. As you can imagine, 1,000 deaths now, it was 10,000 50 years ago. But over the last 10 years, it's just been flatlined, it's been stagnant. And so how do you improve that? How do you bump it down again? Well, I think the helmet thing may help somewhat, but I think prevention through design is one of those things that can help significantly in improvement. So that's the reason we're talking here today. I'm going to put safety through design or prevention through design into context. There are lots of safety practices, and you can see a number of things here: pre-task planning, job hazard analysis, and so on and so forth. and you can see prevention through design. Prevention through design really is a process that starts in the early planning phases and moves all the way through. It's not just designers, even though that's a critically important part of this, but it's also how we approach how we do our work. And I would submit to you that prevention through design is an extremely important part of that, but we also have to have a safety culture, right? So we've got safety practices, all these things that we do to try to protect our workers. And we have safety culture, which says that everyone on the job, from the CEOs all the way down and all the parties involved in it, everything that we do is focused on making sure that everyone goes home safe every night. Okay? And so that means that's a different focus of the organization. It's not, oh, we've got to make our schedule and cost, so just go out there and get the job done. Doesn't matter how you do it, and so on. We had a speaker 2 or 3 years ago when they were building the Mullet Arena over here. And the speaker was from Mortenson, and he said, you know, we looked at the building that arena, and we looked at the practices and the hazards in that arena, and then we designed the way we were going to do the work, so we did not allow our construction workers to cheat. There was only one way to do things, and the right way was the safe way. And he gave an example of, you know, going out and finding ladders on your site, and some of the ladders are damaged. And maybe a damaged ladder would allow somebody to use it if it's on site and fall. And he said, we just take them off site. There's no way we're going to allow people to do things that are going to get them in trouble. And so it's a mentality at the corporate level, at the project level, the regional level, the craft level, the foreman level, the superintendent level. It's all the way down that the only right way to do things is the safe way. And so prevention through design is thinking about things early and up front, and even in our pre-construction aspects, and making sure that things are done right. So if we kind of look at the two big ideas of safety, and one of them is not OSHA, that was just regulations that were put into place because our industry was out of control, and it dictates safety practices, and it does talk about prevention through design, and it looks at job site hazard analysis and all those kind of things. But that's evolved for over 50 years. It's not OSHA. Companies that are good companies to work for, they understand that safety is incredibly important. And so they have safety practices, hazard recognition, response, and specific safety practices, and part of that is prevention through design. And they have safety culture from top to bottom. And when you combine those two things, you can have million-hour work sites that have no injuries, right? No lost time injuries, no reportables, no recordables, and you can do that. But you got to put everything together. So we're going to talk about safety through design or prevention through design today. Here's the definition. You know, it's basically proactive. That's an important word, and it's designing out potential hazards before we get to the point where they're going to hurt a worker and cause health concerns. There are a lot of other terms out there for prevention through design. You can see some of those: design for safety, safety through design, design for construction safety, and so on. When you go out and start looking at the literature, it's littered with many different words. We're going to talk about it as prevention through design today. Okay? Questions? Make sense? So this is the very beginning of the day, and we've got some other speakers here in a few moments. So what is PtD? PtD is looking at safety considerations and constructability. It's looking at safety considerations in the design process. It's making those design decisions based on how they're going to impact our workers and also the maintenance of the facility. You know, one of the prevention through design things that There are a couple of bad decisions made in this building here, right, from a prevention through design. One of them is the parapets on top of this building are not tall enough. They should be 42 inches because we have maintenance workers up there all the time. I think they're 31. So you can just flip over to the side. It's not too good when you fall 5 stories. So don't go up walking around on the roof. Okay, but we have maintenance workers up there. The second thing is, if you go out here in the atrium, and I pointed this out and the university said, we don't want to spend the extra money. If you look at the lights up there, some of the lights are LED lights, which is fine. They have a 20-year life. A lot of the lights are fluorescent lights. If you go out there, half of them are out right now. And so how do you change those lights that are out within 10 years of the life of the facility? Well, you're going to put a worker at risk no matter how you do it, right? So we're thinking about not only construction safety, but also safety of our maintenance workers through the life of the facility. I know there's an example a little bit later about skylights, and 80% of the skylights that you can procure out on the market will not hold up a person. Okay? Is that a problem? Well, if a maintenance worker's on the roof and they step on that light, they're going to go through, and whatever's below them, they fall. And so we need to be thinking about things as we go through. PtD is not having designers get involved in construction as the project goes on. PtD is not a way of placing risk back on the designer. But that's been one of the problems, because people in the design process say, well, you know, I'm making these design decisions that are going to translate into a safer workplace, but what if something happens? Can they sue me? Well, the answer is they can sue you no matter what. You're probably going to get sued anyway. And so it really isn't a way of trying to put that onus back on the designer, right? So PtD is misunderstood in a lot of ways. All right. So I think Mark's going to talk about this individual as well. One of the people that I came across in my career was a guy named David McCullum, and he wrote a great book on hazard analysis. You can see me holding it right there, and was one of the real pioneers in this area. And this is a quote from his book: "To be effective, safety must be converted into a powerful design priority and overriding planning concern." And to give you a little background, I know maybe Mark will a little bit more. He was the guy, from what I understood, who designed rollover protection systems for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers back in the 50s. And so if you look at all the heavy equipment that's out there today that have these cages, that was him, right? And the idea is that if something falls on you from above, or if you roll over and you have your seatbelt on, then you're probably going to be okay. So this guy really did a lot for our industry. But at the end, when I talked to him, we went down and met with him a few years ago. I mean, his point is, let's take care of this up front. No reason to let it happen to us later on. All right. There's a lot of research out there in terms of accidents linked to design, but none of it is as broad as it could be. But every study has said, yeah, when we look at fatalities, when we look at accidents, many times those decisions that were made 2, 3, 5 years before then can be linked directly to what happened, right? We made a mistake in our design. And it could be that it's made in the pre-construction phase. I was involved as an expert witness a few years ago, and this individual, I was on the plaintiff side, the injured person, and a contractor had set up their job work site without even thinking about it, put the porta potties on one side, the trailers on the other, and the laydown yard was in the middle. And a major road, construction road, was right in the middle of it. And so this individual had tried to get out between some pallets. He'd gone to the restroom and was coming back across the road, and he got hit by a JLG high lifter, 30,000 pound high lifter going at about 10 miles an hour. I'm surprised he survived, but the reality of it is, in the pre-construction planning, why didn't they have a designated cross area? Why didn't they have a stop sign there so the JLG operator had to stop every time and look? Why didn't they put the porta potties over on the other side of the road? I mean, there were all kinds of decisions and stupid decisions made by the contractor that put everybody on that site at risk, right? Usually you get away with it. That's the bad part. Usually you get away with it. In this case, it destroyed this guy's life, for the rest of his life. He was disabled. And so accidents can be linked to the design of the facility. They can be linked to the way we procure, the way we do all of our work. They can be linked to our pre-construction planning, trying to look at the hazards we have on the site and design a way out of them. Let me see if I can run this. We didn't try this ahead of time, but we'll go with it here. I might need some help here. Oh, okay, I was looking at that screen.
Most people have no clue that in 2023, the best way to make money on Amazon is not.
We find that we have 4 times fewer injuries when we use prevention through design. Prevention through design is a philosophy and set of practices employed in the design of a facility to prevent accidents during installation and beyond. We collected data from 5 million man-hours of work to correlate our safety performance on various delivery methods. Our recordable injury rates decreased significantly when we prefabricate work. However, we found that when we design the work and prefabricated, our injuries are 1/5 of the national average. When we were able to use lean design build, including prefabrication, our lost workday rate is about 10 times better than the national average. Said another way, when we have an accident, it is significantly less serious than accidents on projects designed by other engineering companies where the work is stick-built. Safety is everyone's responsibility, designers, fabricators, and installers. If we all buy into the importance of implementing a strong safety culture, then the results can be truly outstanding. Safety is possible with a good attitude and a proven process starting early in design. I support prevention through design. It's what we do.
So Victor Sanvito is a member of National Academy of Construction. I think he's a friend of David's, and he's a senior VP at Southland. And they buy into this stuff, and it makes a difference as we go. So, and it's the design process, design build, making sure that we're addressing safety then, as well as our pre-construction activities. He talked about lean, IPD, and so on. All right. So what's the motivation? Well, I've already said it first. Decisions made during design phase have an impact. By implementing these principles, we can reduce and improve the health and safety of our workforce. Maybe it's just the type of paint that we use, or the methods that we use where we're putting workers into an exposure of toxic chemicals. Perhaps it's exposure to dust, and so on and so forth. So we can figure out a way to do things that maybe aren't as toxic as they were. And then designing out and identifying these risks or hazards allow us to, in many cases, be more productive, because our workers don't have to be concerned about safety and are in a better position to get the work done. All right. So, you know, probably the biggest payoff for many of these decisions is in the front-end planning phase. You may have seen this diagram, you know, the ability to influence. I mean, the further we go down, the less influence we can have on a project. Many of the decisions have been made and it's too expensive to make those changes. And so it's best to get the designers involved, and designers in conjunction with the constructors who understand the methods of construction as early as we can, and address this at every part of that life cycle as we go. I think you'll see this again. This is a different viewpoint of the hierarchy controls. Some of you may have seen the upside down pyramid, and I think Mark has that in his presentation later on today, which is fine. This is a little different. Basically, one of the things that we always push is personal protective equipment. I talked about helmets instead of hard hats, but high-vis vests and work gloves and hearing protection and so on and so forth. You know, basically those things are just a given, and they're a last resort. I mean, we wear gloves so we don't get our hands cut, but maybe we figure out a better way of doing it so we don't get our hands exposed, right? I mean, so it's a last resort, but it's still a good resort, and it definitely saves injuries and lost time. Administrative controls, where we train people and we do work scheduling and we try to get our craft workers away from each other, and so on. We can do engineering controls, where we guard equipment so we don't have rotating equipment, or we keep people away from moving heavy equipment, and so those kind of things. Those are engineering controls that we can see as we go. And then substitution, instead of us painting on site, we bring in pre-painted materials that have been painted in a controlled environment, so we're not exposed, right? That's a substitution. And then elimination is we just design it out. A classic example of that would be a situation where we're going to build everything on the ground, so we don't expose our workers to working from heights. It takes a different design to do that because of all the different forces that are in place. And then we lift it up and we connect it in. We see that done quite a bit on high work as we go. So the hierarchy control says that designing it out is the best if we can do it. Sometimes we can't. But the way to get to that point is we actually have to understand what the hazards are. That's one of the difficulties of prevention through design. Ethical dangers. There are things in design that are safety related, and we can take care of them there. I mentioned parapets. I mentioned having people work at heights to try to change out light bulbs when we didn't really need to do that. There are many, many other things that we have. And what we've seen is that prevention through design also brings back productivity and financial benefits as we go. At some point, they're going to have to put scaffolding up here in the atrium. Wouldn't it have been nice to only done that every 20 years instead of every 10 years? Maybe so. And then there's some practical benefits, and I think that really gets down to people feeling safe or safer on their job as they move forward. All right, so let me give you another. I think I can handle it this time, Daniel. Another one of my heroes about this is T.J. Lyons. He's no longer he's retired from Gilbane now, but he's a real exciting.
So prevention through design, great question. It's a simple intervention as you design a project or a structure to eliminate risk. And most of it is engineering. Some of it is how you approach the work. And I'll give you two examples. If you're going to replace a roof and you're going to replace the siding on a building, and you just run a scaffolding up one more tier past the top of the roof, you can no longer fall off the roof. So you don't have to worry about being tied off on the roof, right? The work is so much more efficient. You don't have to tell people, hey, connect your harness. And the trades love it because they don't have to wear the gear. That's simply preventing an incident by designing the work. Related to that is, most people aren't aware of it, 3 to 4% of skylights in the United States will hold the weight of a person. It's nothing, right? No one knows that. So if I'm an owner and I want to have, here's a good example. in our community. We had a boy and a girl go up on the roof of the school, jumped up on a skylight over the gymnasium, and she's dead. He'll never walk again. If they had designed that building, which we have the opportunity to do today, and putting a skylight you can't fall through, and this has been developed overseas over the years. We have plenty of great examples that we can provide here in the U.S. to implement these simple interventions that very rarely cost a lot of money. I'm a huge fan of it because it's practical. We once had a really bad fall. A guy came into an elevator room on the roof of a building, perfectly smooth floor. He came in off a snowy roof and he broke his leg. And I brought the architect up a couple of days later. I said, why didn't you put a rough surface on this floor? And he said, well, it's easier to sweep. And no one sweeps elevator room floors. When I explained that to him, he was like, oh, I never thought of that, right? Going back to making sure the user helps design the space. So then I asked him, I said, how much more would it cost to put they take a broom and they drag it across the concrete to rough it up? He says, it would have actually cost less. Almost every one of these interventions by designing the work results in efficiency. It's really one of the oddest things, but it's something I think we're really striving to get more in the workplace just because it has, safety aside, it makes for better, faster work. And if we can increase the schedule, let's be honest, we can increase profit.
Yeah, TJ talks fast, so hopefully you caught all that, but he's got a million stories. We actually have him on video in one of our Prevention Through Design. Actually, he's on video several times in our Prevention Through Design series over time. So what are the barriers to doing this? And we're going to talk about some case studies and some ways to handle this. I think the first thing is, there's really no training. Hopefully you're gaining some things here today that you didn't know about. Luckily there's a good bit of safety training here in the Delhi Webb School of Construction and a lot of construction programs, but in design programs you very seldom see any training in this. It's really difficult to address risks in the design phase, especially if you've never worked in the field. And many designers have never worked in the field, so the reality of it is they don't really know what to design out. Many times our construction and design folks are separated by contract. They're not together. And so it's very hard to get influence of construction into the design process. Designers are skeptical about bringing a construction person in to help them see what could be done to make it more constructible, but also to make it in a situation where it's safer. A lot of people say, well, this costs money. I think that's a crock, frankly, because if you have one lost workday case or you have a fatality on your job, it more than pays for itself, many, many times over. Again, that fear of increased liability if you're on the design side. If something goes wrong on a project and you are the design team and someone's hurt because that person does not have any relationship to your organization, they're going to sue you for liability because they can in the court system. They're going to sue everybody they can. So I don't think it protects you at all. If you really think about it, if we make it safer, then hopefully that accident doesn't occur. And then certainly we can look at some of the safety things that we want to do. And in those situations, maybe we feel like it's harder to construct, or it costs more money, or it takes more time. And so, but those are decisions and conversations that need to take place. Most of the time, many of these conversations and this idea of looking at hazards ahead of time, those things don't happen. And so we end up with whatever we end up with. And that's really what happens. So there are some barriers. I think education is the number one barrier that we have here. And maybe lack of requirements to do it, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Here's just a simple idea of how this process works. There's typically during the design process, we have 10% design review, we have 30% design review, 60%, 90%, and then we have final construction documents. We would address safety through design or prevention through design at each one of those. We would look at the design team, we would look at internal reviews, we might bring in external consultants to help us, and then we iterate the design based on what we feel like are the best decisions and ideas that we would have. And then hopefully when we issue for construction, then we would have a more safe design for the workers and ultimately for the people who are going to maintain the facility afterwards. Why do I keep talking about maintaining the facility afterwards? Anybody have an idea? Anybody? How long does construction take? How long did it take to build this building? Does anybody know? It took 18 months. 18. 1-8. Okay. How long have we been in this building? Almost 10 years. How long are we going to be in this building? Probably another 40, right? And so, at least. And so, the hazards stay with the building after it's built, right? And so that's why I keep talking about maintenance, right? That's why I keep talking about this idea that someday somebody's going to have to get up there and change some light bulbs when they didn't really have to. You know, that could have been designed out easily. At some point, they're going to put solar on this roof. And our workers, whoever does that, is going to be exposed to a 31-inch parapet where they can flip over. They're going to have to wear fall protection at that point, whereas they wouldn't have if we'd put the right size parapet up there, right? So that's why I keep talking about it. Here's another view or look at it. Kind of the PtD process is over here to the left. But you can see the different places where this would come into play. In feasibility, it would come into play in the design analysis, and then it would also come into play in the construction or pre-construction design process, right? Where we've got the set of construction documents, and now we're trying to actually plan this project and do things that can help us be safer, right? So in this project, they actually came out of the ground starting in January, so it was pretty wet. And one of the things they did is they started on the first floor, which is where the actual, I guess, where you buy your expensive shirts. And then they came up one floor, and at that point, they went in and put a waste slab underneath it. And that waste slab was a working surface, so it wasn't muddy, it wasn't rutted, it didn't get. And at the end of the day, they broke it out and put a real floor down there. And that was an attempt to try to make it for a better working surface for the workers as they went up. That was a smart decision. You know, why do you think they did that? Well, they wanted to be productive, but it also allowed them to be safer as they went up as well. They put stairwells in early, so they tried to stay away from ladders, right? You want to try to stay away from ladders as much as you can. They're dangerous. So try to have a ladder-free project if you can. And it's not hard to do now with scissor lifts and with thinking about how we're going to set our job up. So a lot of things that we can do down here also are design decisions of how we're going to proceed with the construction. So pre-construction. So we've got a lot of construction folks here. We also have design folks. And here's how it lays out. I'm not going to read this, but it kind of talks about what we can do during each one of these phases. And I think they'll have copies of this so as we move forward. But you can kind of see here, and you see the term hazard. What's a hazard? Anybody? What is a hazard? Well, it's something that we consider that in certain circumstances can cause an incident. Okay? And so it can cause an incident, and maybe it doesn't hurt anyone, maybe it's damage to equipment or damage to materials, and many times hazards are just laying there. Right? So if the light bulb went out on this light, here's my ladder. Anybody you want me to step up on this right now? Why not? It has rollers, so it's kind of hazardous, right? I mean, if you think about it that way, but it's in this room all the time. Well, most people probably are smart enough not to do that. Have you ever seen anybody standing on top of a chair like this? You haven't? I have. And, you know, and I actually, when I taught my class, I had somebody, I got up in the chair just to show how it was, you know, but I had somebody holding it, right? So what was the intervention? And I said, that's really a bad decision. Why don't I go get a ladder as we do this? So hazard's something out there. If we're using hand tools, there's a potential hazard of using hand tools. If we're climbing a ladder, there's a potential hazard. As long as the ladder's laying on the ground, there's no hazard. It hasn't been activated yet. Once it gets up there, then now somebody can get on that ladder and fall off of it, right? On this job, it went through 2 summers, and I was out here in July, and it was 115 degrees. Is that a hazard? Well, the heat is the hazard. And so they went to work, starting work at 3 o'clock in the morning. They changed their work processes to try to address that. And so everything we should do should consider the hazards that are there. The project I talked to you about earlier with the high-lifter, JLG high lifter, great piece of equipment, but the operator can't see very well when they're operating it. You just about have to have it for a lot of construction. So we know it's a hazard to get run over by a 30,000-pound machine. So let's make sure that we design a process in place where somebody doesn't have that happen to them. I mean, it basically took all the skin off the guy's leg when it ran over him. It was a terrible accident. Broke like a whole bunch of bones. He was in a hospital for intensive care for weeks. Let's think. Let's design. Okay? I mean, a lot of construction, man, we don't do design. Yes, you do. You do design every day. Because you have to take what the designer has thought that could be built and figure out how to build it. That's the design process. So think about how to build it in a safe manner, so that the only way that you can build it is the safe way as we go. All right, so checklists are nice. We put and we'll send this out to you. There's a checklist here. This is actually from an Engineering News Record article that's also there about a project that had 120 plus prevention through design ideas that were implemented. Erland Construction Company did this. So it's a really interesting discussion. They use checklists. There are lots of them out there online. You can get these. And it basically says, okay, let me see if I can do this one. Okay, 1.3, design steel columns with holes at 21 and 42 inches above floor level to support guardrail cables. Why would you do that? Well, if they're on the outside perimeter of your building, you run cables through those and tie them down, and you don't have to have tie-off protection at that point. You got a guardrail on the outside, but a lot of people not only do that, they also embed, and I think that one's on here too. Let's see. Let's see. I don't think it's on this one. It's one of the other ones. Basically, where they put in tie-off points that are welded onto the columns. So you just click on when you're up there and you have your fall protection on. We don't have to go looking for something. We just click. And we're there. We're tied into the column. How much does that cost? Not much at all to do that. But we need to be thinking as we do this, right? Okay. And then I've got this little ditty here, and then we'll almost be done. So let me see if I can. I like this. I've shown this a number of times for classes.
With Cox, you can pay just $30 a month for fiber-powered internet at a price that fits your budget.
And I don't like cocks, so anyway. I wish we'd done that here. That would have been really good. Wish they'd done that in Miami a few years ago. Might have saved 120 people's lives. We've had several confined space deaths here in Phoenix over the last 5 years. Workers go down in there and because of toxic fumes pass out and die. This is one of David McCullum's big things, is make sure you guard everything that is operating and moving in any facility. I had a friend who lost his arm because of that. this job, there was still power lines, active power lines behind the building. And so when they started, so they ended up having to lift over that. And so they basically had somebody out there guarding with a whistle and making sure that people weren't under that and making sure that they were safely working around those power lines. We do that. We do have that. So. I mean, putting parapets on roofs is in the Bible. You can find it. Pretty good video, though. So how many of you thought about some of that stuff? Probably not before this morning, maybe. So I'll give you another example with this building. So if you go back in the back here, on the northwest side, there's actually some dumpsters there. And so the trash trucks can come in and pick the dumpsters up. But when they designed that spot, and I was like, we need to have a place where the garbage can go. We need to have a utility elevator, which is down at the other end, you know, so the garbage trucks can come in, we can recycle. They failed to design a place for the trucks to turn around. And so the trucks went in, picked the garbage up, and then they had to back out, and they ran into the telephone pole, the light pole back there, and caused a bunch of damage to the wall and all that. So they had to come in and actually move something and put some more concrete down, you know, to make it all work. I mean, who would have thunk it? Well, I did, but the designers didn't. And so you just have to look at how this stuff works and how we're going to be safe, because the faster the trucks can get out with good visibility, we've got lots of students. I mean, how many of you walk down behind the building here? Probably every one of you. You know, is that a hazard to the students? Yeah, it is. So anyway, that's about it for me. Recap. I don't know if it's an emerging process. It's been around for 50, 60 years at least, probably longer than that. It's a smart thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Usually site safety is a contractor's responsibility, and certainly pre-construction we can do a lot of stuff, but some things just can't be controlled if they're already designed into the process. And there are a lot of places where you can get help with doing that. One other thing I'll say is that there's no legislation requiring this in the United States. And I think David talked about this before. In the UK, there's the CDM, Construction Design and Management, which was passed in, I think, 1997, 1998. And it requires a prevention through design consultant on every project above a certain amount of money, and also every public project. And in the UK, if somebody dies on your construction site, you can go to jail. That's another little thing about it. In Australia, they passed similar laws in 2012. In the UK, their fatality rate per 100,000 workers is 1/5 of the US, right? In Australia, it's 1/4. Not everything about prevention through design is, not all of that is because of prevention through design. Some of that's safety culture and the way things are pursued. But when you think about it, if we could save 800 workers' deaths in the United States, would it be worth doing this? I think it would be. I think it would be. And so I'll just throw that out. We've got some presentations to that effect in the material that David will provide you. So there are a lot of benefits. And so I think I have run out of time, but do I have time for a couple of questions? Yes, sir. Okay, so give me a question. What kind of questions? I've got a couple of general questions up here, and if you have a question, be happy to provide that. Anybody? You guys are just so blown away by my presentation. So what are the best ways to drive a project, an organization to prevention through design? It would be best if the owner organization, the owner of the facility, pushed it, if possible. Enlightened companies like Mortenson and many others, Gilbane and many other general contractors, do a lot of this during their pre-construction planning. It's just part of the way they approach a job. They approach it as a hazard analysis and how can we design out potential hazards. I think the best way long term would be if we had legislation that was part of our OSHA that required this. But a lot of people push back because they say it'll cost more, and that's just another class of consultants that'll be out there. If we can save 800 lives, would that be worth it? I think it would be. And then what are the barriers? Lack of education is the big one. So, any other questions? All right. Well, yeah. Yeah.
So when you said, can you please use the
Yeah. Touch the mic and speak into it. Just press it on down.
So when you said while constructing this building, you had put a temporary slab for workers, right?
Yeah.
So was that in the original plan while doing the pre-construction?
It was in the pre-construction plan by the contractor. It was definitely, it wasn't a usable slab. You know, so it wasn't the final slab for, you know, it's not the one that's down in the facility now. So they decided to put a 4-inch slab in on their own dollar, and once they got the first floor above that, which is the second floor, poured, I mean, you have a covered area, right? And they used it for storage. They used it for fabrication out of the, you know, it was shade. It kept them from getting in the mud and kept the dust levels down. And they did it, you know, as a way it was worth their money. And so at the end of the project, they went in and jackhammered it out. They recycled the concrete. You know, they took it off to a recycle place, and then they poured the slab that's down there now. So it was something that they decided to do, you know, as part of their pre-construction.
So was it just a plain cement concrete construction like a PCC without the reinforcement, right?
I think they put wire reinforcement in it, so it wouldn't crack up, it wouldn't just fall apart.
Okay.
Because they had some heavy loads on it, but I mean, it was pretty cracked up and grungy looking by the end.
And
but it kept them out of the dirt.
just one more question.
Yeah.
How did you convince the general contractor to do that? Like,
That wasn't my idea. I mean, it was
Okay.
their idea, and obviously they had done enough projects where they looked at that as something that had a cost back, so they felt like it was a benefit for what they're doing. I didn't know they were going to do it. They did it, and I was like, wow, is this the final floor? It looks kind of grungy. And they're like, no, this is a throwaway floor.
So the idea came from them?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
came from
good.
them. Yeah.
Okay.
Bunch of our graduates. All right, so I mean, everybody on the site here who ran this project was a Delhi Webb School of Construction graduate.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
Oakland Construction, good contractor.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Oakland's been a friend of our program, and everybody out there was one of our graduates. So, yeah, good question.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, David, I'll give it back to you. Oh, I got one back here.
I just have a doubt. I mean, who is going to take the responsibility if any incidents happen in the construction site, like constructing company, contractor company, or subcontractors, or the owner?
Yeah, so in the U.S., generally, when you get to the site, the general contractor is responsible and their subcontractors are responsible for safety. But if someone is injured on site and they're working for the general contractor, because of our workers' compensation laws, they can't sue the contractor. So they're going to look around and say, who can we sue? And they're going to say, there's an architect over there. We're going to sue the architect. And we're going to sue the subcontractor who was over here that we felt like potentially caused part of the problem. And we may sue the material supplier, and so on and so forth. So there's no hiding, and if, so the answer is, let's make it a safe site so nobody gets hurt, and then we don't have any suits, at least on workers, injuries. And that's kind of where it comes from. Say again? Well, so the question is, if anyone dies, it's a huge damage. Well, usually if someone dies on a construction project, the project is shut down for a number of weeks for investigations. There can be fines levied here in Arizona Department of Occupational Safety and Health. There is the potential for lawsuits, for negligence. There's potential for breach of contract lawsuit against the general contractor for not operating a safe site, because usually that's part of the contract that says you're responsible and it's supposed to be safe, and so on. So a fatality not only is a moral thing, right, but it also is a very expensive thing, and it absolutely devastates the productivity of a construction project. So, because it's terrible for the co-workers, it's terrible for productivity because you're delayed, and then the co-workers in the back of their mind is like, this is an unsafe job, it's jinxed, I don't want to be out there, and so on and so forth. So, good question. All right, we're going to keep on going, so. All right, thank you.